Hello developers, welcome to Gamified. In today's video, we are going to explore the basics of materials in Unity. So when we develop something in Unity, the most important thing to keep in mind is materials. Because materials are the assets that represents the color and the textures of the surfaces of objects. As you can see in this picture, there are multiple materials and they are representing the different colors and also different textures and transparency and also the reflectivity of that object. So let's start to learn how we can create materials and manipulate game objects like a pro. Go to Unity Hub and create a new project. Under the template section, I'll choose a 3D core and create a new project. But before creating our project, I would like to let you know that there are 3 different rendering pipelines in Unity, and materials behave differently in those 3 rendering pipelines. So what are those 3 rendering pipelines? So let's see what are those 3 rendering pipelines. The first one is the built-in rendering pipeline. The second one is the universal rendering pipeline, or in short URP. And the third one is high definition rendering pipeline, or in short HDRP rendering pipeline. So these 3 rendering pipelines manipulate the materials in many different ways, and they have their own capabilities and their own limitations. So we will actually learn how these 3 rendering pipelines have different type of properties in their materials. Let's get back to Unity Hub again and create our project, and these will be in the built-in rendering pipeline. So I'll keep the name as it is and create the project. So our project has been created, and now let's see how a material works on the built-in rendering pipeline. Firstly, I will set up our scene a little bit by creating some game objects. So this will be our scene, and now let's create some materials for these objects. To create materials, go to Asset Browser, right click, from this create button here, go to material and rename your material. So this is what are the properties of the material. So as we are in the built-in rendering pipeline, so the material properties will be the supported properties by the built-in rendering pipeline. So the first thing you need to know is a shader. So after you create a material, you have to select the specific shader that you want to render the texture or render the color of the object into your scene. And then next are the components or the properties of that material that you want to create, and you can put your textures in these little boxes. So a material consists of 3 basic components. Let's see what are those components. The first component of material is the shader, which actually determines how light interacts with the surface of the object based on its material properties and lighting conditions. The second one is the texture, where we use images to provide surface details such as color, roughness, metallicness, normal mapping, and so on. The third component is properties, which controls various visual aspects of the material such as transparency, specular highlights, emissions, and so on. So these are the basic components of a material, and let's go back to Unity and see how they work. As we created our first material, let's apply it onto the object. I'll apply it on the plane, and currently you can see any changes because I haven't do any changes here. So I will replace or change the color into something like this. You can see the color of the plane has been changed because this plane material has been applied onto the object plane here. And if we go further, you can see the plane object is now looks different. And if you observe carefully, that you can see that the plane is a little bit shiny. It's because the smoothness property of the material is set to 0.5. If we reduce it to 0 or a little bit high value than that, then we can see the shininess disappear. And if we go back to the position again, you can see the shininess is increasing, and yeah, this is the maximum level of smoothness. And you can see a reflection of the sky of the sun here, as the material is fully reflective now. So let's set the smoothness to 0 again, and you can see the shininess or reflectiveness is gone. So the smoothness property of the material controls the shininess of the material. And let's see what does the metallic do. So look at this material right now. If I change the value of metallic, you can see changes into the surface of the object. You can see it's getting darker. That means it will look more metallic now. And now if we increase the smoothness, you can see it's looking different than before. So this is what metallic does. And now if you decrease the value of metallic again, you can see the darkness is going away and the material is looking more bright again. So this is metallic and smoothness works. Now there are other components like the normal map or height map or occlusion. You can actually use textures. You can use PNG images as your texture, and you can put those images into these boxes to change the material looks. So let's see how does that work. Firstly, I will download a PNG image for our texture. So I'll search for floor texture, and you can find a bunch of textures that you can use into your scene. I'll download this texture and use it into our project. I'm importing this image into our Unity project. Go to the plane material and put this PNG texture into the albedo here. And you can see the material has been changed and it is projecting the PNG texture that we have been provided into the albedo section here. So this is how you can use a texture, a PNG or JPG texture or JPG or PNG image as a texture into materials. There are many other things called normal map and the height map, the occlusion map, and the detail masks. And as you working further, you will know about these slowly. So try and experiment and let me know how you learned. Now let's check out the section here, which is tiling and offset. So let's see if I change the value of the x and y axis to something else, like it is currently set to 1 and 1, and let's change the value of the x axis. I'll set it to something like 2.5, and you can see as I'm changing the tiling of the x axis, it's the texture is has been changed. So let's observe that again. So if I increase the x value, the tiling of the texture is getting smaller, and if I decrease the value of the x, it is getting bigger. So this is how the tiling of the x-axis changes the texture. Let's set it to 1 again, and let's change the value of y-axis now. If I increase the y-axis, you can see it is also changing the materials in the y-axis, and if I decrease the value, it is also changing the texture of the materials. So this is how you can adjust your texture according to your need. Now let's try to create some different kind of material. So now I want to create a glass material so that I can see through the object. Let's create a new material, name it to glass mat, go to hierarchy, and first select the rendering mode to transparent, go to the color section here and set the alpha to 0 point something like 25, and put this material into one of these objects. As you can see, the sphere is now transparent and I can see through the sphere. So this is how you can create a glass material, and you can also tweak the smoothness and metallic value to make it look a little bit different. Like if I decrease the smoothness, the edges are being a little bit dimmer, and if I increase it again, the edges are being more reflective. And also if I change the metallic, it will look a little bit different. As you can see, it is more hard now, and you can use any value that suits your project. So this is how you can create a glass material in built-in rendering pipeline. Now let's see how you can create a reflective material so that it reflects the environmental scenarios. Let's duplicate this glass material here and rename it to reflective mat, and put this material into another object, and firstly set the rendering mode to opaque and set the albedo alpha to the max value, and increase the smoothness of the material and the metallic a little bit also. And let's go to the object here, and you can see the object is now reflecting the sun. That means this object is containing a reflective material into it. That's why it is reflecting the sun. So this is how you can create glass and reflective materials in Unity, and you can use different textures and different images as your texture and make the material look so cool. So now let's move on to the second rendering pipeline and see how materials work there. So I'll close this project and go to Unity Hub, and I'll create a new project, and from the template section here I'll choose the 3D URP core that will create a project based on URP rendering pipeline. So I'll rename this project to my project underscore URP and hit create. So our project has been created. Firstly, I will create a game object into the scene. So I'll create a plane and I'll create a cube and I'll create a sphere. You can create anything as you want. So yeah, this is our scene for this project. And now let's create some materials for these objects. And you can see in URP rendering pipeline, the shader is saying that it is set to universal render pipeline. And the previous material in the built-in rendering pipeline was the shader was set to standard. You can also use standard shader here, but as you are working in the universal rendering pipeline, so you should use universal rendering pipeline. And if you go inside it, you can see some other options also. So currently it is set to lead. Please explore and experiment with the other types also and let me know how it works. So I'll keep it to the lead selected here. And now I will apply this object to our cube. And let's see how the URP materials contains different properties than built-in rendering pipeline. So the first one is you can see the workflow mode, which is currently set to metallic. You can choose between specular and metallic. Experiment with it and see how they differ. Okay, the second one is the surface type, which is currently set to opaque, and you can also use the transparent. So this surface type is similar as the built-in render pipeline. So there is a new option here, which is a render face, and currently it is set to front. And if you expand the drop down here, you can see there are three options, which is both back and front. And if you select back now, then you can see you can only see the back face of the material. You can see the front face. And if you set the both, then you can see every face of the material. And if you go inside the material, you can also see the material from the inside. And if you again set it to front, and then you go inside it, you can see nothing is rendered because you have set the render face to front. So from the front side only you can see the face of this material. So use the setting as your project needs. Like if you need the both render face, then select both, and if you need the back or the front, select each. In the down section, there is option called base map, and it is similar to the built-in rendering pipeline also, where you can put any texture or any image into this box. Like I'm importing the previous texture into this project also, and I'm applying this texture into the base map here, and you can see the texture of the material has been changed. And you can also select the tiling here like before. If you increase it, it will change, and if you increase in the y-axis also, it will change. So this is how you can use texture, or you can use PNG or JPG image as your texture into the URP rendering pipeline material. Now let's create the same glass material into this project. I'll create a new material, name it to glass, and here you can see the workflow mode is set to metallic and the surface type is need to opaque. So you need to set it to transparent, since the glass is translucent, like you can see through it. So you have to select the transparent in case you want to create the glass material. So I'm setting it to transparent, and the blending mode is set to alpha. You can set it to multiply, additive, and power multiply. We'll see it later how it works. So the first thing you need to do is you have to set the alpha of the base map to see through it. So I'm setting this to 0.25 and I'll apply this material into the cube here. As you can see, it is now translucent and you can see the environment through it. So it has been transferred, or it has been converted into the glass material. You can also tweak the smoothness and metallic map here also, and the you can set also you can also set other things like normal map, height map, and there is a new thing called occlusion map, and you can use a occlusion map here also to show the ambient occlusion of that object. So this is how you can create a glass material and material with a texture in the universal rendering pipeline. Now I'll close this project also, and I'll go back to Unity Hub again, and I'll create a new project which will be HDRP project. So I'm setting the 3D HDRP core, and I'm renaming the project to my project underscore HDRP. So our HDRP project has been created, and we will do the same things as we did in the two previous rendering pipeline projects. So firstly, I'll create multiple game objects into the scene. And firstly, I have created the plane, and I'll create another two objects. And I have created two game objects. And now let's create materials for these objects. And let's see how the material works in HDRP. And you can see so firstly the shader is set to HDRP lead. That means you are in the HDRP rendering pipeline project, and you have to use the HDRP lead shader, or you can use there are things inside the HDRP shader here. You can see there are multiple shaders for the HDRP material, and I'm currently using the lead. You can use anything as you want according to your project need. So for now, I'll keep it as the lead shader. So the some things are same as it was before on the URP and built-in rendering pipelines, like the there was a thing called surface type in the URP also. So you can see some similarities, and also you can see some differences between the previous rendering pipelines. So in the surface type, you can choose between opaque and transparent, and the rendering pass there is only one option, which is the default, and there is another option called Cal mode, actually, which is the render face. You can choose the front and back. So what a Cal mode does, like if you set the Cal mode to back, it will cull the back face of the material. That means it won't render the back face of your material because the cull mode is set to back. And if you set it to front, it will cull the front face of the material. So let's apply this material into one of the object. As you can see, you have culled the front face. That is why it is only rendering the back face. And now if you set it to back again, and you can see the front face is now rendered, and if you go inside it, you can see the back face of the material is not rendered. And if you set back, and if you set it back to front, you can see the both the faces of the material has been rendered. And there is a thing called double-sided here also, like in the URP rendering pipeline, there was an option called render face, where you were able to set the face to both, and here you have to click on the double-sided checkbox to make it work like that. So if you enable the double-sided checkbox here, you will see the cull mode has been disabled, because if the material has been set to double-sided, you cannot cull any face. And there is another option called normal mode. You can choose how the material or how the object will reflect will render the material. Like from here you can see there is an option called flip, mirror and none. So if you set it to flip, it will flip the reflection of the environment. And if you set it to mirror, you will look as you look in the mirror and you can see yourself in real life. So this exactly works like that. And there are many more things called double-sided global illumination, material type. You can check out these functions here. And you can see there is also an option called surface inputs, as it was before in the URP section also. So you can put texture in the base map, like you added the texture before. Like I'm importing the previous image into our project and I'm applying this image as a texture, and you can see it's working like before. You can set the tiling also here and here, and you can also apply a normal map or any other maps or any other images as a map into the three sections here. Now let's try to create the glass material in HDRP also. So I'll create a new material called glass, and I'll apply this glass material onto our capsule, and firstly make it to make the surface type to transparent. It will take some time to make it make it transparent. Okay, as you can see, it is already looking a little bit translucent. You can also see there are many more options, like it wasn't in the built-in rendering pipeline, or it wasn't in the URP rendering pipeline. So you will have more control on the material into the HDRP project. So you can see there are options called double-sided here also. If you set it to double-sided, and you can go inside and you can see the material has rendered the both side or both face of the material. Okay, now let's see how the blending mode works. So currently it is set to alpha and you are looking the material like this, and if you now set it to additive, then you can see the material is looking different. And if you set it to par multiply, then you can see it looks like before again. So you have to set this function, you have to set this property according to the need of your project. So I'm keeping it to additive as it is looking more realistic, or I can actually set it to alpha to tweak it more. Now let's make it look a little bit more transparent. To make it a little bit more transparent, I have to change the alpha of the base color. So I'll make it to 0.2 or 0.1, and you can see the material is now transparent and it is working like a glass material. So this is how you can create materials in among the three rendering pipelines in the starting from the built-in and then the URP and the HDRP. So I hope you have learned how you can create materials and set its properties among the three rendering pipelines of Unity. So that's all for today. See you in the next video.